What is going on, everybody? Gino checking back in for another video today, and in this video I want to go a little bit more in depth and actually explain to you guys what intermittent fasting is. Intermittent fasting has been spreading around the internet like crazy the past like couple of years or something, and there's still a lot of misconception and wrong ideas on what intermittent fasting actually does, specifically around the idea of what does it do for your fat loss, does it have any specific benefits or advantages to losing fat or building muscle. So I figured I'd make a video going a little bit more in depth on what it actually does and if there are any specific benefits to fat loss or muscle gain. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a coffee, and let's dive into what intermittent fasting actually is. So intermittent fasting, or also referred to as IF, is a dietary approach where you restrict yourself from eating in certain time periods. Its periodic names are fasting and non-fasting, or fasting window and eating window. It's a method that lots of people use nowadays after it's been popularized by tons of well-known YouTubers and fitness or bodybuilding gurus. People often use it as a way to have more control over their caloric intake and actually, quite surprisingly, experience less hunger when dieting. Yeah, that's right. Eating less frequently but also being less hungry. Shocker, right? It sounds very counterintuitive, but trust me, there is some sense to it. So how does intermittent fasting actually work? Now, there are multiple ways to approach intermittent fasting, since it's actually very customizable to the personal preference of each individual. The most common method to follow is the 16-8 window, where you fast for 16 hours and eat for 8 hours. Now, of course, you can bump this up however you like. So, for example, you could do an 18-6 window, a 24 window, and so forth. It's all up to you and your personal preference. So, how do you do this? It's very simple. During the time that you're fasting, you eat nothing. See? No, it's that simple. But all jokes aside, let's take myself for an example here, since I'm currently utilizing intermittent fasting while I'm on a cut. So I wake up at around 8 AM. Now, depending on what my schedule is like for that given day, I start by drinking around 500 milliliters up to 1 liter of water to hydrate myself, which is especially important when you're fasting, but also in general when you're not going to be fasting. So then I go downstairs and pour myself some coffee. Coffee has shown to suppress your appetite levels, so in simple basics, it'll make you less hungry, which is good, especially when you're fasting. I then start working for a couple of hours and I keep drinking a good amount of water to fill myself up, drink some more coffee, and then I start eating my first meal at around 1 or 2 PM. Now, what I personally generally tend to notice is that I can focus a bit more since I'm not constantly looking at the time for when my next meal will be. Now, I set a certain time for myself as for when I will have my first meal of the day and simply focus on the task at hand until that time. Now, if you tend to notice that you're simply waiting for the first meal, just distract yourself from that food focus by taking a walk or actually making an effort to zone in on what you have to do at work or school, for example. Now, a lot of people still ask me questions about intermittent fasting if it, for example, boosts their metabolism, increases human growth hormone levels, or make them burn more fat and so forth. It does not work that way. Normally, a common theory regarding metabolism is that you need to eat multiple small meals a day to boost your metabolism. Now, even in regards to fasting, where you have less frequent meals, the whole theory isn't actually true. The thermic effect of food, or TEF for short, is what's responsible for any additional caloric expenditure. TEF is primarily influenced by caloric content and not the number of times you eat. So in theory, you would be boosting your metabolism evenly with either one big meal or 6 small meals, all coming down to the same caloric value. So fasting does not slow down or boost your metabolism in that particular. That all comes down to how much calories you're eating in a day. So in terms of better fat loss, caloric restriction is what causes you to lose weight and thus burn fat. But a common belief surrounding fasting is that when you don't eat and burn calories by, for example, walking or simply doing your thing, you're going to burn through your fat stores, since you're doing all of those things on an empty stomach. This isn't true either. As you may or may not know, in order to lose fat, you need to be in a caloric deficit. This is what actually enables your body to use your fat stores as energy, since you're not giving your body enough food and thus energy to run on. So it needs to take it from somewhere else, which will then be your fat stores. So even though you wake up and do your thing on an empty stomach, the primary thing driving your fat loss is still the calorie deficit. Now if I had to put intermittent fasting into a very basic sentence, it would be you're postponing your breakfast to later in the day. And that's basically it. Now especially for people who tend to be hungry later on in the day, it might be beneficial to implement intermittent fasting. Since you can start eating at, for example, 2 p.m, you will have a lot of room left to eat later on in the day and not have to deal with hunger as much as you were to have with a normal feeding strategy. Now there might be some people that want to train fasted when they're utilizing intermittent fasting. A common belief, or misconception I should say, is that you would be in a catabolic state since you didn't have a meal beforehand. Now it's been proven in numerous studies that even when fasting for 24 hours, you've only used up about 57% of your liver glycogen. So when you're working out in a fasted state, you're still using your muscle glycogen that's stored from the food of the day prior. So you don't go catabolic when you work out on an empty stomach, since there's still energy and glucose stored from the foods you ate the day before. Now even though you don't go catabolic when you train fasted, there are still a lot of people that cannot train on an empty stomach. And myself included, I am one of those people. So again, find your own personal preference. If you like to train on an empty stomach and you're perfectly capable of doing so, then by all means go for it. But if you can't train effectively on an empty stomach, then at least have your first meal before you head to the gym. A lot of people simply just overcomplicate intermittent fasting way too much. When you utilize the basics of nutrition, the way you plan it out all comes down to personal preference. You need a caloric deficit to lose fat, and you need a caloric surplus to gain muscle. How you eat your food, in what order, in what kind of time scheduling, in how many meals and so forth, all comes down to your personal preference. So if you like to fast for the majority of the day, then by all means do so. As long as it allows you to hit your caloric and macronutrient targets for the day in the most enjoyable and effective way possible, you will get the results that you're striving for. So it's not some sort of life hack that you automatically burn more fat or build more muscle. It's simply a time schedule that you're giving to yourself in order for you to potentially reach your caloric and macronutrient goals a lot easier and more sustainable, for you to actually stick to the dietary approach that you're choosing. Alright, and that is all for this video, guys. Hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please be sure to smash the like button because it really helps out the channel grow. Comment down below and subscribe to the channel for so much more content coming really soon. I'm out, guys, and peace out. See you in the next one.